The group text came in at 6:18 on a Sunday morning. I know the exact time because I'd been awake for an hour already, sitting with my coffee at the kitchen table, watching the winter light come in gray and thin through the window. My phone buzzed on the counter. I picked it up expecting a weather alert or a spam notification from some app I'd forgotten to delete. It was from my brother Tyler. "Hey everyone. Just wanted to let you know we've decided to keep Christmas at the lake house this year. Nicole and I agree it's best to keep it immediate family only going forward. We hope you understand." I read it 3 times, not because I didn't understand the words, but because I needed a moment to absorb the fact that he had sent this to a group that included me, as if I were a neighbor being politely uninvited from a block party, as if I hadn't co-signed the mortgage on that lake house 4 years ago, as if I wasn't the one who spent an entire August weekend caulking the bathroom tile when the contractor bailed, as if immediate family had ever, for a single moment in our entire lives, excluded me. I set my coffee down. I didn't call. I didn't type anything emotional. I didn't ask what I had done wrong or beg for an explanation. I just typed 2 words and hit send. "Understood. Thanks." Then I opened a different app, the one connected to the joint mortgage account I shared with Tyler on the lake house, the one he had asked me to co-sign because his debt-to-income ratio was too high to qualify a loan. I had been a co-borrower for 4 years. My name, my credit score, my financial reputation, all of it had been silently holding up the walls of a house I was no longer welcome to enter. I initiated the formal co-borrower removal request before I finished my second cup of coffee. The process takes anywhere from 30 to 60 days once the lender reviews the remaining borrower's qualifications. Tyler would need to refinance in his name alone or find a new co-signer. And given what I already knew about his finances, which was, unfortunately, quite a lot, neither option was going to be simple. 41 hours later, I woke up to 53 missed calls. 11 from Tyler, 22 from Nicole, 8 from my mom, which told me they had looped her in and she was now panicking on their behalf, and 1 from the loan servicing company, confirming my request had been received and flagged for review. There was also a voicemail from Tyler. His voice was tight in the way it gets when he's trying to sound calm, but isn't. "We need to talk. Call me back immediately. This is not okay. What you just did is not okay. And you need to fix it before this goes any further." I listened to it twice. The second time, I noticed he didn't say he was sorry. He didn't say he hadn't meant to hurt me. He didn't acknowledge the group text at all. He just said, I needed to fix it. I didn't call back. What I did instead was text my friend Rachel, who had been a real estate attorney for 6 years and owed me a favor from the time I helped her move across 3 states in a minivan during a rainstorm. "Are you free this week? I need to talk through some things." She replied in 4 minutes. "Tuesday. Bring snacks." What did they do? Everything, I thought. They did everything. But I'll start from the beginning. My brother Tyler is 4 years older than me, and for most of our childhood, that gap felt enormous. He was the one our dad coached in Little League. He was the one who got the car on his 16th birthday and the credit card on his 18th. He got the speeches about responsibility and the extended deadlines when he missed them. I got the expectation that I would figure things out quietly, without making a fuss, because that was apparently my role in the family ecosystem. I figured things out. I worked through school, graduated with a finance degree and 0 debt. Something I had pulled off through a combination of scholarships, part-time jobs, and a summer internship that turned into a full-time offer before I even walked across the stage. By 27, I had a clean credit history, a healthy savings account, and a clear sense of how money worked, largely because I had been managing my own since I was 17. Tyler had a different relationship with money. Not careless exactly, more like optimistic in ways that didn't account for math. He bought things he couldn't quite afford yet on the assumption that he would afford them soon. He was always almost there, always one opportunity away from the version of himself he believed he was becoming. He met Nicole at a work conference and married her 18 months later. She was polished and decisive, and had strong opinions about every room she entered, including the ones in our family home. I remember watching her stand in our mom's living room during their first Thanksgiving together, looking at the furniture with the specific expression of someone already rearranging it in her head. She never did anything I could point to directly. That's the thing about people like Nicole. They're too smart for that. What she did was quieter. A comment here about how some people can't let go of the past. A suggestion there that Tyler needed to start thinking about his own family's future. A raised eyebrow when I mentioned something I had done for Mom. Small things. Individually meaningless. Collectively, over 2 years, they amounted to a slow and steady redefinition of who belonged inside the circle. The lake house was Tyler's idea. He had found it online during the pandemic, when real estate was doing strange things. And he called me one night, practically vibrating with excitement. 4 bedrooms on the water, an hour from the city, priced just under what it should have been because the sellers needed to move fast. He had done the math. If they put down 20%, the monthly payment was manageable. The problem was the down payment. Tyler's savings were tied up. Nicole's credit had some issues from a business she had wound down 2 years earlier. The bank would approve the loan, but they wanted a co-borrower with stronger financials to share the liability. He asked me carefully. He framed it as a family investment, which, in a way, it was. The plan was for our whole family to use it. Mom, me, everyone. Holidays and summers, a place to gather. He said he would handle the payments himself and that my name on the document was just a formality, just to help them get through the application process. I said yes, not because I believed it was purely a formality. I understood exactly what co-signing meant, but because I believed in the version of my family he was describing. A place to gather. Holidays. Everyone. I spent the first summer after closing helping them furnish it. I found the outdoor furniture at an estate sale and drove it up in a borrowed truck. I fixed the screen door, repainted the dock, and tracked down a plumber after the kitchen sink backed up during 4th of July weekend. I treated it the way you treat something that's partly yours, because legally, it was. The first sign that Nicole saw things differently came the following fall. She mentioned, in the careful way she had of mentioning things, that she and Tyler had been talking about hosting more intentional gatherings, smaller, more curated. I didn't ask what that meant. I should have. By the second winter, I started getting less information about trips to the lake house. Tyler would mention in passing that they'd gone up for a weekend. I would hear about it from Mom after the fact. When I asked Tyler about planning something for spring, he said they were figuring out the calendar and would let me know. He never let me know. By the 3rd year, I stopped asking. What I didn't stop doing was watching. Not obsessively, but carefully. The way you watch a situation that doesn't feel right, even when you can't articulate exactly why. I had access to the mortgage account portal. I checked it occasionally. The payments were going out on time, which was the one thing I genuinely needed them to do since the loan sat on my credit history whether I was ever invited to the lake or not. Then, 8 months before the group text, my grandmother passed. Nana had been sharp and quiet and deeply private about money, which is where I got it from. She had outlived my grandfather by 20 years and managed her own affairs with an accountant she trusted and nobody else. At her funeral, Tyler gave a speech about legacy and family values that made Nicole cry in the front pew. 2 weeks later, her attorney called to schedule the reading of the will. I didn't hear anything about what was in it. Tyler mentioned it was being handled and not to worry about the details. I assumed he meant there wasn't much, that whatever she had left had gone to Mom or been distributed simply. I let it go. I should not have let it go. What I found out later, much later, and not from Tyler, was that Nana had left a separate instrument for me, not a piece of the general estate, which was split between Mom and Tyler per her primary will. A separate trust, funded and finalized 18 months before she died, with one named beneficiary, me. She hadn't told me about it while she was alive. Nana wasn't someone who talked about money except in abstract principles. What she had told me once while we were doing dishes after a Sunday dinner was that she saw me clearly, that she knew I was the one who showed up, the one who did things without being asked, and that she wanted me to know she noticed. I hadn't thought about that conversation again until Rachel pulled up the trust documents on her laptop on a Tuesday afternoon with a cup of tea going cold beside her keyboard. $47,000. Held in a revocable trust that had become irrevocable upon Nana's death. My name as the sole beneficiary, distribution available immediately upon claim submission with the trustee bank. Tyler had known about this for 8 months. He had been present at the attorney's office. His name appeared in the documentation as a notified party, along with a formal notification letter the attorney had sent to our home address, the home address I hadn't lived at in 7 years, which Tyler knew perfectly well. The letter had never been forwarded. I sat across from Rachel for a long moment. Outside her office window, the city moved at its usual pace. A bus, a woman with a stroller, a man eating a sandwich while he walked. Rachel said quietly, "This was not an accident." I said, "I know." She said, "What do you want to do?" I thought about it for exactly as long as it took me to finish my tea. "I want to file the claim, and I want to understand my exposure on the mortgage if I remove myself as co-borrower." Rachel pulled up a second document and started typing. "Here is what I had already initiated," she explained. The co-borrower removal request was within my legal rights. The lender would conduct an independent qualification review on Tyler as the sole remaining borrower. Given his debt load, which included a car loan, a personal line of credit, and what appeared to be some activity on a business credit card that was inconsistent with a stable financial picture, the lender might require either a new co-signer, a significant payoff of existing debt, or a full refinance at current rates, which were considerably higher than the rate locked in when I had co-signed 4 years ago. In short, without me, the mortgage became very expensive and very complicated very quickly. Rachel also told me that the failure to forward the trust notification letter, while ethically ugly, sat in a legal gray zone. There was no law requiring a sibling to forward your mail, but the trustee bank had an independent obligation to reach the named beneficiary, and that process had simply never been completed because nobody had provided my correct address. Correcting that was easy. Rachel made 2 calls while I finished the snacks I had brought. By end of business that Thursday, the trust claim was filed with my current contact information. The bank confirmed receipt. A distribution review would take approximately 10 business days. That was the week before the group text. So when Tyler sent immediate family only going forward on a Sunday morning, I already knew most of what I needed to know. The text wasn't a surprise. It was a confirmation, the last piece of information I needed to stop wondering if I was misreading things. I wasn't misreading anything. I had simply been useful until I wasn't. The cosign got them the house. The labor got the house functional. The credit score kept the loan stable and quiet on their record for 4 years. And at some point, somewhere between the curated gatherings and the forwarded trust letter that never got forwarded, it had been decided that I was no longer an asset worth maintaining a relationship with. Understood. Thanks. 2 words were sufficient. The missed calls came in waves. Tyler in the morning, Nicole in the afternoon, Mom in the evening, after they had clearly briefed her on a version of events that centered my removal request as an act of aggression rather than a response to being systematically excluded. I answered Mom on the 3rd day. Her voice was the way it gets when she's genuinely distressed, not performing distress for someone else's benefit. She said, "Sweetheart, Tyler says the mortgage is in trouble. He says you did something with the loan." I said, "I removed myself as co-borrower. It's a standard process." I submitted a formal request through the lender. She was quiet for a moment. Then, "But why?" I kept my voice level. "Because I was removed from the family in a group text. If I'm not family, I shouldn't be on the mortgage. That's not Tyler didn't mean it that way. How did he mean it? She didn't answer that. What she said instead was that this was going to affect everyone. That the house was important to all of them. That I was making a difficult situation worse. I said, I didn't make the situation. I'm responding to it. There was a long pause. Then she said, he's really worried. They both are. I said, I know. I'm sorry you're in the middle of it. And I was. That part was true. But I didn't offer to undo anything. I hung up and sat for a while with my phone face down on the table. Outside my apartment, someone was playing music a few floors up. Something slow and familiar I couldn't quite place. I thought about Nana in her kitchen with dish soap on her hands, saying, I see you clearly. I thought about 4 years of driving up to fix things in a house where I was eventually considered a guest who hadn't been invited. I thought about the letter that had gone to the wrong address on purpose. I poured a glass of water and went back to work. Tyler finally sent a text that was 4 paragraphs long. I read it once and then set it aside. The broad summary was that I had acted impulsively, that I was damaging their financial stability over a misunderstanding, that the group text had been poorly worded and Nicole felt terrible about it, and that I needed to call the lender and reverse the process immediately so they could deal with this as a family. He did not mention Nana's trust. The following Monday, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail and listened. It was a man who identified himself as Tyler's financial advisor, calling on Tyler's behalf to explain the urgency of the mortgage situation and asking me to get in touch at my earliest convenience. I forwarded the voicemail to Rachel and wrote beneath it, Is it normal for someone's financial advisor to cold call their sibling? She replied with a single laughing emoji and then, No, call me. She explained that Tyler had almost certainly shared more information with this advisor than he should have, and that under no circumstances should I engage with anyone calling on Tyler's behalf about a financial instrument with my name on it. All communication should go through the lender directly, and if Tyler wanted to have a conversation about the mortgage, he was welcome to have his attorney contact mine. I relayed that in a brief, polite text to Tyler. His response came in 11 minutes and was not brief or polite. He said I was being vindictive, that I had always had a problem with Nicole, that I'd been waiting for an opportunity to sabotage their life, that I was proving what they had suspected for years, that I was impossible to be in a family with, that Nana would be ashamed of what I was doing. I read that last sentence twice. I thought about Nana writing my name into a separate trust document. I thought about her making sure I was the sole beneficiary, not Tyler, not the estate, just me. I thought about the care it takes to do that quietly, specifically, irrevocably. I typed back one sentence. Nana actually left me a separate trust. I filed the claim last week. You might want to talk to your attorney. I hit send and put my phone in a drawer. The meeting happened because my mom asked for it, and I agreed for her sake. She picked the restaurant, a place near her house where we'd gone for birthdays when we were kids. Big booths, decent pasta, the kind of lighting that makes everyone look slightly better than they feel. I arrived 7 minutes late. Not dramatically late, just enough. Tyler was already seated, Nicole beside him, very still in the way she gets when she's prepared for something. Mom was across from them, her hands around a water glass, her eyes going to me immediately when I walked in. I sat down next to Mom. Tyler started before I had finished unwrapping my scarf. He said this had gone too far and that we needed to find a resolution because the lender had already sent a preliminary qualification notice and the numbers weren't working without me on the loan. I said, I know, he said. Then you understand what you need to do. I looked at him for a moment. He had the expression of someone who had rehearsed a negotiation and was waiting for the other party to sit down at the table they assumed they were invited to. I said, I'm not here to negotiate the mortgage. That process is going through the lender. I came because Mom asked me to, and because I think you deserve to hear some things directly rather than through text. Nicole shifted slightly. Tyler's jaw tightened. I said, You used my name on a loan because you needed my credit score. For 4 years, that loan sat on my financial record. I co-managed a property I was eventually uninvited from attending. I fixed things, paid nothing in return, asked for nothing, and was written out of the family in a group text, Tyler said. That text was not. I said, I'm not finished. He stopped. I said, Nana left me $47,000 in a trust. You were in that attorney's office. You knew. The notification letter went to Mom's address, which has not been my address since I was 22. I don't know if you made that choice deliberately or if you simply didn't think to correct it. Either way, that money sat unclaimed for 8 months while you were having curated gatherings at the lake house. Nicole opened her mouth. I looked at her, and she closed it again. I said, I'm not asking for an apology. I'm not here to relitigate the last 4 years. I came because Mom is sitting here, and she deserves to see this happen in person rather than hear versions of it from both sides separately. Mom had her hand over her mouth. Her eyes were wet. Tyler said quietly, You're really going to do this? I said, I already did it. I'm just explaining why. He leaned back. The rehearsed negotiator was gone. What replaced it was something tireder and more honest. He said, What do you want from us? And there it was. The real question. Finally, sitting on the table between the breadbasket and the water glasses. I thought about Elena from the story I used to listen to once, the one about the daughter who had signed for a business loan and been cut out by voicemail. I had heard it on a channel I'd forgotten the name of, driving home one night, and I remembered thinking she knew exactly what she wanted. That was the thing that had stayed with me. She hadn't been confused or wounded into action. She had been clear. I wanted to be clear. I said, I don't want anything from you. I want my name off that mortgage. And that's already in process. I filed the trust claim, and those funds are being distributed regardless of this conversation. I have removed myself from every financial entanglement we shared. From here, you refinance in your own name, or you sell the lake house, or you find someone else to co-sign. That's a decision for you and Nicole and your financial advisor. I reached into my bag and set a single piece of paper on the table. It was a printed summary of the trust distribution confirmation from the trustee bank, time-stamped 2 days prior. I said, I'm not your backup plan anymore. I'm not the quiet one who holds things together and doesn't ask questions. I'm not available to be written out of a group text and then written back into a mortgage crisis. Tyler stared at the paper. I stood up. I touched Mom's shoulder for a moment, and she reached up and gripped my hand briefly, the way she used to when I was small, and something had frightened me. Then I picked up my bag, put on my coat, and walked to the door. Tyler said my name once, quietly, before I got there. Not wait or please or I'm sorry. Just my name. Like a question he'd forgotten he was asking. I paused with my hand on the doorframe. I didn't turn around. I said, You sent me a group text telling me I wasn't family. I agreed with you. And then I walked out into the cold and let the door close behind me. The refinance took 6 weeks. I know because Rachel was tracking the process on the lender's notification system, which flagged activity on any account where I had been a party. The final confirmation came on a Friday afternoon in February, a formal letter from the lender confirming that my name had been fully removed from the loan instrument and that Tyler was now the sole borrower under a new rate. The new rate was a full 1.5 points higher than the one they had locked in with me 4 years ago. I did not calculate what that would cost them over a 30-year term. I thought about it briefly and then decided the math wasn't my business anymore. The trust funds had been distributed 3 weeks earlier. I had moved most of them into an index fund and set aside a portion for something I had been thinking about for almost a year. A small financial education nonprofit I had been advising on a volunteer basis was looking for seed funding to expand their program into 2 new cities. I wrote them a check large enough to matter and not so large that I had to explain it to anyone. I thought about Nana when I sent it. I thought about her saying she saw me clearly. I think she knew I would use it for something like that. I think that was precisely why she left it to me and not anyone else. Mom and I have dinner on the second Tuesday of every month now. We went through a difficult few weeks after the restaurant. She called me crying twice, and both times I let her cry and didn't defend myself, and also didn't apologize for anything I had actually done. Eventually she said, "I know you didn't start this." I said, "I know you know that." And we moved on to talking about other things, the way people who love each other can when they choose to. Tyler and I haven't spoken. Nicole sent me a single text 3 weeks after the restaurant that said, "I hope you're proud of yourself." I read it, felt nothing in particular, and deleted it. I am not proud. I'm also not sorry. I am something quieter than either of those things. I am finished. What I've learned, what this whole stretch of time taught me slowly and then all at once, is that there is a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from maintaining a position you were never actually given. I spent years acting like a full member of something I was being edged out of, smoothing things over, showing up, signing documents, fixing screen doors. I told myself it was because I loved them, and part of it was, but part of it was also because I had grown up in a family where being needed was the closest available substitute for being seen. I don't need to be needed anymore. I need to be present in things that are actually mine. My apartment is small and very quiet in the mornings. I have a desk by the window and a plant that has somehow survived 3 years of my inconsistent care. I work early and take walks in the afternoon, and sometimes call Rachel to talk through ideas that are not yet fully formed. We're doing well, both of us. She just took on a new client, and I just got offered a contract with a firm I've admired for 2 years. Things are moving forward. Not dramatically. Not in the shape of a story with a clean moral, just forward, at a pace I can sustain, in a direction I actually chose. The last piece of paper I filed in the folder I had labeled closed was the trust distribution confirmation. I slid it in behind the mortgage removal notice, and the text screenshot I had printed out the one that said, "Immediate family, only going forward at 6:18 on a Sunday morning." I closed the folder. I put it in the back of my filing cabinet. Then I made coffee and sat down at my desk and opened my calendar and began planning the rest of the year. It was, I realized, entirely and completely mine. No co-signers, no group texts, no screen doors waiting to be fixed. Just the work and the window and the light coming in clean. Some people call it cutting ties, like it's a violent thing, like something has to bleed. I didn't experience it that way. What it felt like was more like untangling, like a knot you've been picking at for years, finally coming loose in your hands without drama, without force. You just look down and realize you've been free for longer than you knew. And you fold your hands, and you breathe, and you begin.